I went out to Spain with 𝐼𝐨𝐫, and we went out to a bar crawl. There was this one guy, and I remember he approached 𝐼𝐨𝐫 and went like, mwah, mwah, on both cheeks. And I'm like, bruh, I was about to square up with homeboy. I'm like, nah. That's not how we doing it here, dog. You don't do it that way. No, that's not what we doing over here, bro.
Hey, Jamie Woods, we here to travel and motivate. No curry, we just trying to keep our minds in a golden state. We answer to nobody but the Lord, we control our fate. Too many things to see just to sit in a hole and bake. We growing, ayy.
So I'm gonna go over some of the culture shocks that I experienced while I was in Spain. And I've been to Spain twice. So I've been all around the country twice. And I think I've stated this before. There's a lot to love about Spain. There's so much that's going for it. Phenomenal country, beautiful beautiful people. There's a lot of pros about Spain. So some of these points that I'm gonna be saying in this live stream also apply to some other European countries. Some of these things aren't totally unique to Spain, but it's still a shock that you're going to encounter when you go to Spain. Of course, if you travel through the European countries, this is something some of these things are kind of common throughout these countries. For my dating folk out there, public affection is huge in Spain. Okay, so public affection is several different things. You might be walking down the block and you'll see a couple smooching in front of you, tongue deep and everything. And you're like, damn, there are kids around here. But Spaniards are so passionate. They're just very passionate people. They're very handsy. So when you're speaking to a Spanish person, it's not uncommon for them to touch you in your thigh, touch you in your shoulder, touch you in general. They're just very touchy-feely. They're very touchy-feely. Sometimes when they introduce themselves to you, they might kiss you on both cheeks. That's just the way it is. So Italians, I think, do the very same thing. They kiss you in both cheeks. Mwah, mwah. Spanish people are the same way. They're mwah, mwah, like that. That's how they introduce themselves to you. Like some even men to men sometimes they might even do that to you. Mwah, mwah. You know what I mean? What the hell, man? Why is the guy kissing me like that for? You know what I mean? I remember I went out to Spain with 𝐼𝐨𝐫, and we went out to a bar crawl. There was this one Mexican guy that he lived in Spain, so he's been living out there, so he got accustomed to the lifestyle out there. And I remember he approached 𝐼𝐨𝐫 and went like, mwah, mwah, on both cheeks. And I'm like, bro, I was about to square up with homeboy. I'm like, nah. That's not how we doing it here, dog. You don't do it that way. No, that's not what we doing over here, bro. You shake their hand and that's it. Or you give them a hug and that's it. Or you give them a kiss in the cheek like that and that's it. But homeboy went like, mwah, mwah, like all crazy and shit, all passionate. I'm like, bro, what the hell? That's my girl, bro. What the hell's wrong with you? Imagine, guys, if a man went up to your woman and went, mwah, mwah, and started getting all thing with her and shit. How you gonna feel about that? You know what I mean? But that's how Spaniards are. That's how Spanish goes. Even if that's not their girl, even if it's your girl, simply they are. They're very touchy-feely, very passionate, very romantic type of people. They're extremely romantic, and they want the world to know. You know what I mean? So sometimes you might be walking down the block, and they'll be like going in and stuff, and in the sidewalk somewhere, and on the side, on their backs against the building or something. Their backs against a wall or something. I'm like, what's going on over here? But that's just the way Spanish people are. They're like that. They like to smooch. They like to touch. They like to have public affection. I've heard certain things when I went to Spain. I'm not going to say it on the live stream, but let's just say I heard a lot of screaming, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of banging. Spanish people are very passionate and they want the world to know. Okay, so if you see people smooching up on the sidewalk somewhere in broad daylight, it's normal. If you see them kiss you in two cheeks, it's normal. If you see them touching up all over you, it's normal. Another thing that Spanish people do, and this is also so for a lot of Latin Americans, a lot of my Latin American folks, my Hispanic folk that are watching this, some of these things might not be uncommon to you because I feel like Hispanic culture, Latin American culture, and Spanish culture is very similar. It goes hand in hand in a way. So we're used to this. We're used to the very public, romantic, type of stuff. We're used to that. Maybe not to the degree that the Spanish folk do it, but we're kind of used to that. Another thing that Spanish people do when you go out to restaurants or when you go out to a bar or wherever is that the person that's serving you, especially if it's a female, they might call you certain names. So they might say mi amor, ¿cómo está? Or like they might call you like certain names, right? Like how you doing? How's it going, baby? How may I help you, my love? How may I help you, sunshine? Spanish, right? They have certain things that they say in Spanish that they tell you. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily flirting with you or that they like you. It's just the culture. And it's the same thing with Spanish culture, is that they'll be like, oh, mi amor, ¿cómo está? Like, you know, they'll say these type of words like my love, like how may I help you, my love? Okay, my love. You know, like they'll say that a lot in Spain, and the same thing goes for Latin America. They do that a lot over there. So it's not that they flirting with you or anything. It's just common. That's just the way their culture is. Okay, so for any of you guys are like, oh, is she hitting on me? Is he hitting on me? No, that's just the way their culture is. They're very touchy-feely. They're very, you know, they flirt, very flirtatious, especially in the bar. But in a restaurant setting, in a bar setting, when they're calling you these things, it's just customs. It's just the way they act. You know, it's not that they're hitting on you or anything, or it could be, who knows? But it's just the way they act. Okay, this is what they tell everybody at that point. So there's a lot of Latin Americans in Spain. So believe it or not, guys, Spain is very diverse. A lot of people think it's just Spanish people that America's the only country in the world that's diverse, and that's far from the truth. Almost anywhere you go in Europe is very diverse. I mean, you go to Italy, diverse. You go to France, extremely diverse, very diverse in France. A lot of Africans in France from all over Africa. Believe it or not, Moroccans all over France, right? But the same thing applies to Spain. There's a lot of Moroccans in Spain. Morocco's very close to Spain. You could take a boat ride from Morocco to the south of Spain, and boom, you know. And especially in Barcelona. I think out of all the cities I went to, so I went to Barcelona, Seville, all the big cities, so Barcelona, Seville, and Madrid. And I think out of the three, I noticed that the most diverse was Barcelona. I think a lot of Moroccans and Middle Easterns, a lot of people from India, from the Middle East that go and live in Barcelona, in Spain. And there was a couple people that I met that were working in shops. I guess their family owns the shop and they work at the shop. And they didn't even know any Spanish whatsoever. I'm like, bro, you live in Spain and you talk no Spanish whatsoever. That's crazy. But you'll encounter people like that's not from Spain, that work in Spain and speak no Spanish. They only speak English and their own, I guess, Arabic or something, whatever they speak, right? So you do have a lot of immigrants that are in Spain. So the same thing that we experience in America with how diverse we are is kind of like a melting pot. Spain and Europe is also the same way right now, to where there's a lot of different type of cultures, a lot of different type of people, everything. America is not the only place that's diverse. So this also applies to Latin Americans. There's a lot of Latin Americans that are in Spain. And I'm Dominican, so there's a lot of Dominicans that are in Spain, especially in Madrid. When I went to Madrid, and Barcelona too, I encountered a couple. But Madrid specifically, there was a lot of Dominicans in Madrid. There would be places I would go to. I went to this one sushi spot. It was like a Japanese spot, right? But it's no Japanese people that work there. It's Spanish people in the back and Dominicans in the back. A bunch of Dominicans working there with dembow music and everything playing in Spain, in Madrid. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy, bro. There's a lot of Dominicans here. That's nuts. And the thing is, a lot of them, when you talk to them, some of them do have that Dominican accent, but a lot of them have the Spanish accent. Some of them were actually born over there. So they are of Dominican descent. But the thing is, they were born and raised in Spain, so they talk with a lisp. And that's the thing is, the way Spanish people talk is like with a lisp and stuff. You know what I mean? They talk very different compared to Dominicans.